And welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we're doing a Chinese dish. Actually, we have this mapo tofu. Now this is a pork and tofu dish. It's a Szechuan dish, so it's a little bit hot and spicy. It's sort of a traditional dish served around the time of Chinese New Year as well. And it's absolutely fantastic, and here's our ingredients. So we're starting with some tofu. We have some ground pork. We're going to use a little bit of our chili oil. I'll show you the link in the description below. Some soy sauce. We're going to use a little bit of ketchup. We have this black bean and garlic paste, and also some chili paste. We're going to be using some Szechuan peppercorns. You can get these in a lot of different grocery stores. Dried chili pepper, some onion, some garlic, some ginger. We're going to be using some green onion. And we're going to use the whites and greens separately. An eggplant, some mushrooms, and a little bit of cilantro. So to get things started, we are going to brown the pork. We actually do this recipe sort of in two stages. We prepare the pork first, and we make more than we need for one serving of this, or one meal. And the pork just sits, you can put it in the fridge, you can put it in the freezer once it's cooked, and it will stay good for quite a while. So we're going to season it, a little bit of black pepper, some salt, and then this is going to go into a really hot cast iron pan. So once the pork portion is done, we are going to just let it all chill, and then we're going to do the second portion a little bit later. Now, we did it all on the same day in two stages. So pork into the pan, and it helps to have a really hot pan. And it's cast iron. It doesn't care. You can get it as hot as you can. You can see it cooking right away. So we're just going to spread that out a little bit. We want to make sure it has really good contact with the heat. And while that starts to cook, we are going to also season the other side. So once you've spread it out a little bit, we're just going to do a little bit more of the black pepper and a little salt on the other side if you want. Not too much, because this dish does get quite a lot of seasoning later as well. So there we go. We're going to let that cook for a little while. Again, this is a really high temperature. We want a lot of browning. We want a good sear on that, just a lot of flavor. So while that starts, we are going to start with our garlic. So we're going to peel the garlic. Pretty easy just to smash it under the knife. Now this recipe does use a lot of aromatics. It's one of those really fragrant, spicy dishes. It's got a lot of interesting stuff in it. And we're just going to give our runaway garlic there. We're going to give this a good chop. We don't want large pieces of garlic in this, so we're just going to mince it pretty finely. And that's about where we're going with that. So that's pretty much good enough for the garlic. You want it, again, pretty finely minced. You don't want large pieces in the final dish, but once we're done with the garlic, it's time to turn back to the pork and see how it's doing. And you can see a lot of color already because we had it at such a high temperature. So now we're just going to give it a good stir. We're going to turn it over so that we get a little bit of the uncooked meat, some good contact with that heat. You can see that great color on there. All that color is some amazing flavor. So we give it a good stir, make sure that some of the stuff that's uncooked has some good contact with that really hot cast iron. And then let that cook for a little while, and we can go back to preparing our aromatics. So next step is our ginger. We're going to peel our ginger. So we want to make sure that we're getting all that skin off of there. This is pretty fresh ginger. We've used some older ginger in the past. This one's really fresh, so it's really easy to cut the skin off or scrape the skin off with the back of the knife. We've shown you that in the past. And just make sure you get any little bits of skin out of there. You don't want that. It's a little fibrous and tough. And much like the garlic, we're going to mince this pretty finely. Ginger's as I said, quite fibrous, so you do want to make sure you have a very sharp knife for this. It really helps to make sure that you're getting good small pieces. So there we go, just a good mince on the ginger as well. Then we're going to add our Szechuan peppercorns, the whole chili pepper, and that's going to add some great flavor to the whole dish. The garlic and the ginger as well, all going in together. And we're going to let all of this come up to temperature. We want to get some good color on all of these ingredients. We want to wake up those Szechuan peppercorns a little bit. So we're just going to stir this all together and make sure it's all well combined in that still very hot cast iron pan. And meanwhile, we're going to get ready with our other ingredients. So we're going to start with this onion. Now, typically we would use a shallot for this, but we had this very small red onion, so we're going to use that instead for this one. If you would prefer to use a shallot, go ahead. It is great in this recipe. And we're just going to give this a nice mince. Again, we're going to give it a pretty small dice to go into our recipe. So once everything's come up to temperature, we're going to add our onion. And you can see some of that great color in there from the browning and all of those great ingredients just cooking together. The fragrance from this already is fantastic. At this point, your kitchen is going to smell fantastic, really, really good. That great garlic and ginger smell, those Szechuan peppercorns are waking up. We add the onion in there. And we're going to cook it until it gets to about here. So you can see it's very dark. We've got a lot of really good browning. We want to keep stirring it and making sure that the unbrowned parts keep getting good contact with that hot cast iron. And then once it's all cooked to about this point, we're going to set it aside. So this is going to go in a good heat-proof bowl. You can see those little crispy bits stuck to the bottom of the cast iron. You do want to scrape as much of that out as possible. It is excellent flavor. So we're going to spread this out a little bit. We do want it to cool down. Now this is definitely more than one serving, so we're going to put what we don't use aside. As I said, that goes in the freezer. So a little bit later, once the pork is all cooled down, we're going to start going with our other ingredients, and the first thing in is going to be the eggplant. So this is one of those really nice Chinese eggplants, those long and slim ones. Very easy to get those nice bite-sized pieces with this by cutting it into strips and then just cutting it into nice-sized chunks. Now this ingredient, we don't want it to cook too fast. We don't want it to overcook. We also want it to have sort of a presence in the dish. We want it to be visible, so we're going to cut it in pretty big pieces. So a little bit of cooking oil in the pan, so a neutral cooking oil, and a little bit of sesame oil as well. So that gives us all a really sort of brightens up the flavors of everything. That sesame oil is really, really intense. And these eggplant pieces, of course, are like sponges. They soak up all of that flavor. So next we're going to chop up some mushrooms. So we've got the eggplant going. We're going to let a little bit of color get on the eggplant, and we're going to chop these mushrooms. We're just going to put them in nice slices. And those are going to go in with the eggplant. And much like the eggplant, the mushrooms are going to soak up a lot of the flavor from the oil that we've got going in the pan. And again, you want a pretty high temperature for this because we do want some browning on all of these ingredients. We want the eggplant and the mushrooms to get a little bit of sear, a little bit of color on them, so that they get a really nice flavor. And you see Chef Caleb just making sure there's good contact with the pan. Next, we are going to deal with our tofu. Now, this was a much softer tofu than we usually use, but not so soft, of course, that it's too difficult to cut. Again, it helps to have extremely sharp knives for this. And we're just going to cut this into pretty small cubes actually, and this is going to be one of the last things we add to the dish. Partially because we don't want it to break up too much. We want it to be in these nice big pieces, and again, visible. And then we're also going to use the whites of the green onions in the dish itself. Now the greens we're going to save for a little bit later. That's going to be part of the garnish. That adds a really excellent flavor once it's all said and done. But the whites we're going to add in to cook. We're just going to cut that right down to about where the greens start and set those greens aside. So in goes the green onions. And a little stir, and you can see lots of great color on those mushrooms and lots of color on those eggplants. They've been cooking for some time now. They've also shrunk a little bit. They've lost a lot of liquid. We're going to add the pork back in, and we're going to add all those sauces that we had earlier. So we have the this is the black bean garlic paste. And we have the chili paste. These are actually Korean ingredients that we're using in this one. You want to get as much of it out of those out of those little containers as you can. Next is the ketchup. Now we're using some homemade ketchup that that Chef Caleb made when he had his restaurant. We will do a video on that at some point. We definitely like it. It's better than store-bought. And last thing is just a little dash of soy sauce. And you can see instantly you get a little bit of steam coming up. That soy sauce is going to help deglaze the bottom of the pan. There's some nice crispy bits from the mushrooms and the eggplant down there as well. And then while that's cooking, you just want to stir it all together and make sure that everything's getting well combined. Once everything's well combined and everything is good and hot in that pan, we're going to add our tofu. This is the point that we're getting ready to eat at this point. We're very close to the end. Now we added 2 packages of the tofu. And at this point you want to stir it in very delicately because the tofu will break up very easily. You don't want it to be sort of mashed all the way through. You can use a more firm tofu than this as well. Anything softer than this, like a silken tofu, we wouldn't recommend because you do want those nice pieces in there. It's a great textural difference. It sort of soaks up the flavor of everything. While everything is coming up to temperature, it's time to get the cilantro ready as well. So we're going to chop up the cilantro and the green onions as well. So this is the green portion of the green onions, and we're just going to chop those pretty finely as well. And these get sprinkled on top of every dish. They are... I mean, I called them a garnish earlier, but they're not really optional. They're part of the flavor profile of this dish. Now, we typically serve this over just plain white rice. And it really is a delicious, very spicy, if you want to make it spicy. It's a very spicy, very aromatic dish. It's really delicious. And a little bit of that green onion and a little bit of that cilantro on top, and that's it. You want to make it pretty, add another little cilantro leaf. Presentation counts. And that's it. That's the recipe. Absolutely fantastic. Really, really delicious. It's got a lot of flavor going on. The Szechuan peppercorns add this amazing floral aroma and a nice spiciness to it. You can make it spicier as well. You can add red pepper flakes. You can add some of that fermented hot sauce that we made as well. A little bit more of the chili oil as well, which we didn't show, but we did drizzle a little bit on the end as well. But if you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.